everyone, and welcome to today's roundtable discussion on how to promote sustainability in your sport. I'm Georgia. I'm going to be your host for today's event. I'm a former snowboardcross athlete, and sport has been part of my life for work or pleasure. So I'm really excited about today's chat. And we are joined by an incredible panel. I'm going to go to the individual guests, and if you can give us a brief introduction of your background and how you link to today's topic. Carolyn, start us off. We have Carolyn Hedley.
Hi, everybody.
Impact Sports. Off to you, Carolyn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carolyn. I'm a sustainability consultant based up in Edinburgh in Scotland. I've been working in sustainability in sport for nearly 20 years, actually, predominantly in the golf industry, but last few years as a consultant working across various different sports. So really delighted to be here and amongst some various panel as well. So great to be here. Much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carolyn. We might not be able to see Carolyn because just of technical issues, but she is still there. Fergus, you.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, guys. Thanks for the invite to join this today. I'm CEO, day job CEO of Swim Wales. So we're after WRU and FAW, we're probably third biggest NGB in Wales out of the 60 odd registered NGBs in Wales. I also sit on 3 other boards, so I'm a director of British Swimming, so that focuses my time on the elite and performance side of aquatics, and I'm vice chair of the Welsh Sports Association. Have been for 7 years in that role, and I've just joined recently Cardiff Metropolitan University Board. So I've been asked to lead on elite sport and sport pathway and community on the board of Cardiff Met. So pleased to meet you virtually.
Brilliant, thank you. And then we have Eve Joseph, head of social impact at British Triathlon.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. It sounds like I am the relative newbie to this space. So I joined British Triathlon last September. As Georgia mentions, head of social impact. That means I am responsible for our sustainability portfolio, but then also our ED&I portfolio as well. In terms of sustainability, I come from a background in the corporate world. So I worked for Microsoft for a number of years, mainly focused on the kind of business imperative of sustainability. So how we try and get businesses across the globe to utilize technology to kind of advance and change their sustainable practices. So bringing it into the sports context is thinking about, I'm probably the person a number of sports organizations were going to within the corporate lens. So yeah, delighted to be here and think a bit more about how we can uplift the sustainability conversation in sport.
Thank you, Eve. And Gary Stewart, CEO at Volleyball Ireland.
Thanks, Georgia. Yep, Gary Stewart, CEO of Volleyball Ireland. Originally from Cumbria in the northwest of England. Been in Ireland for just over 10 years now. The last 6 of those with Volleyball Ireland. We were back in November, I believe, the first national governing body in Ireland to sign up to the UN Sport for Climate Action Framework, Sport for Nature Framework, and I believe also the first volleyball federation in the world to do that. So very excited to be here to share a little bit about, I suppose, our story and ethos as a relatively, let's say, developing, agile governing body in Ireland, really trying to make strides into this area. So thanks for the invite.
Yeah, and thank you all for being here. Amazing panel. So before we start, just so everybody knows, we are recording the session and you will be sent a link as well, so you can watch it back or send it to anybody that wasn't able to be here today and that might find it useful. We will be starting with a poll that you should be able to see on your screen now. So it's a little question for you to all fill in so we gather your thoughts. If you cannot see it for any reason, please do let me know. It should pop up now. So I'll give you a few minutes to fill that in. What are your main concerns around sustainability within your sport? You can fill that in and get into the chat. Okay. A few more moments. Okay, right. So firstly, I think let's discuss why sport should be more sustainable and what are some of the key environmental challenges that sport face. So some, for example, obviously some challenges are changing climate, the high temperatures affecting players' health, increased operational costs, flooding, drought. We then have obviously costs, availability of resources, public opinion, social pressures. But Carolyn, I'll come to you first. If you were able to share with us some of the key environmental challenges that sports are facing.
Yes, I think it is really an exciting time for sport when it comes to sustainability. As I said in my introduction, I've been working in sport for a couple of decades nearly now, and originally it was very much some pioneers in the sport, maybe some sports that were specifically affected by the climate that took the initiative to address sustainability. But really, since the pandemic, all sports, all businesses really are starting to have to think about future-proofing their operations, thinking about the impacts they're having on the surrounding environment and the surrounding communities, and really starting to gain a bit more momentum in addressing environmental challenges, but also realising that there's lots of opportunities and positive things to be had from sustainability. So as you mentioned there, the kind of key sustainability challenges I think that sports are facing, although all sports are very different, the general key ones are the changing climate, warmer, wetter winters, drier, hotter summers. These are affecting particularly the outdoor sports, whether it's turf-based sports, water sports, mountain sports, are all having an impact from the changing climate. And then also indoor sports and other sports are really being affected by things like increased heat, drought periods, things like that. And this is also having a knock-on effect on the resources that we're using. So where, when and how we're playing our sports is really under some challenging times in the next decade in particular. Mention their resources, water, waste, energy, all these materials, clothing, equipment, all the things that sport relies on to be able to perform and produce the sport for our spectators is coming under challenges in the last few years in particular. And then, of course, the public opinion and social pressures that come with that. The general public are more aware of sustainability and environmental matters. So there is maybe pressure on our sports or our facilities to do better. But also we have an ideal platform. Sport is in a unique position here to influence our athletes, our participants and our spectators and local communities to do things a bit greener for the good of ourselves and for the good of the planet as well. So yes, lots of challenges, but again, lots of opportunities, which I'm sure we're going to be coming to in the next hour or so.
Thanks for that, Carolyn. And it's so true. Sports is such a powerful tool, isn't it? So it's a great way to actually try and promote more sustainability in all areas of our life. But Fergus, Gary, is there any other challenges that you've come across or from your experience?
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in. I think Carolyn's touched on quite a few of them. I mean, overall, I mean, I look in terms of priority, where we came from as an aquatic body, with 150,000 children every week and learn to swim, 350,000 adults saying they enjoy the water. They're what we call aquatically active. So you've got 500,000 people in Wales, believe it or not, nearly 15 million people, 15% of the population who enjoy the water in some shape or form, and that's indoor. So number one was protecting our activities and protecting our sports. So that sustainability word for us is having a future came kind of first. And that was shamefully, and I'm trying to be honest there, shamefully that topic really only rose to the top of the board meeting, the conversations at board level, when the cost of living crisis bit in and we started looking at the increase in energy and the impact and the whispers and rumblings around closures of facilities. So we've just under 400 pools across Wales. So clubs were getting concerned, swim schools were getting concerned, and the real knock-on effect. So protecting the sport, protecting activities was huge, and not necessarily in any order. But then the audience demand, protecting the environment, like Carolyn just said, came very quickly second. We're trying to attract younger audiences, and that's 16 to 24 bracket. They expect, I'm a 51-year-old man, born in the 1970s, 1972. For me, we're playing catch up, my generation, and we've let a lot pass us by over the last 30 years. But the new, our up and coming future athletes, participants, volunteers, etc., they demand this. They expect this. This is something that we should be doing, and it's shame on us. I said off air, I've got 4 daughters. Shame on us if we don't do something that's in our control when we're in these kind of positions. I think thirdly, then quickly, is just attracting commercial partnerships. Again, there's no compromise. Some of the commercial partners that I speak to, there is no compromise. They talk about safeguarding and welfare, and very soon after, in almost the same breath, is sustainability. So if you're not at the races and you're not seriously talking about what that looks like for your sport, and the term I use is and being taking a sector leadership approach. If you're not being a sector leader, then people are asking questions. So there's 2 or 3 points in there. I think, again, just cementing what Carolyn said. So give somebody else a bit of airtime.
Gary, do you want to go? Or
yeah, thanks, Steve. I think Carolyn's given a pretty comprehensive overview there. And basically, I was just putting a line through all the bullet points I prepared for this as she reeled them off. So thank you, Carolyn, for that. But to re-emphasise Fergus's point around the public perception, volleyball is a very, very young audience as well, and it is absolutely an expectation from our members that we're putting policies and action plans in place, but we're also being really, I suppose, explicit and obvious with the actions we're taking, so it's clear and it's visual. I think that's really important as well. Beach volleyball is one half of our format. I suppose we play indoor, then we also play in the sand. And coastal erosion is a big issue for us at the moment. There's a beautiful beach in County Wicklow in Ireland called Bridis Bay. We scoped it out about 3-4 years ago, and we went down, we had a look and thought we could run brilliant tournament here, beautiful setting, 2 or 3 courts side by side. We went back last summer and the beach is disappearing. We could get 1 court pretty much on that beautiful stretch of beach. So it's a real problem just for the survival of our sport, and it's important that governing bodies are showing leadership in this space. To also re-emphasise Fergus's point around the commercial opportunity, we've been in discussions with potential sponsors. They expect the sustainable action plans, but also there's a massive opportunity there for the sector to lead and help partners achieve their ESG targets and their goals as well. Because a lot of these corporations maybe are not best placed to do work around gender equality, for example, or reducing health inequalities, but sport is. There's a massive opportunity. Whilst we talk about risks and challenges and threats, when you go through it in detail and you brainstorm the opportunities, there's a real chance to be creative here and to positively benefit your sport.
Well, so all I was going to add to what everyone else has said is someone explained this to me a few months ago, and I really like the way that they placed it, which is when we look at the environmental challenges on sport, it can be quite overwhelming if we try and think of all the different things happening. And they talked to me about thinking of this in kind of fast changes and slower changes. And one thing I would just add to the question around kind of the challenges, the fast ones we see written about quite a lot: heat waves, flooding, poor air quality, fires. In the triathlon world, it's very much focused on water quality. So there's one area to look at are the challenges of those immediate things that are facing us right now in events that are happening today. And then the second one are those more slow ones that are impacting the sport more holistically. And that's what Gary just alluded to in terms of volleyball and coastal erosion. So there are things affecting our sporting industry around that are going to take longer. So we're going to have shorter winters. So Georgia, this would have affected your sport. You know, with shorter winters, it crams in winter sports into a smaller period. Coastal erosion, Gary's already alluded to, and I know that's going to affect golf quite significantly. There was a report that came out that said a lot of UK golf clubs are going to essentially not exist because a lot of them are near the coast. Sea level rise again in terms of raising seas, and then just geographical suitability. So the equator in many years' time may become inhospitable to live, let alone run a marathon or host the Olympic Games. So one thing I just wanted to share on this particular question was, if we think about the challenges in those kind of fast, immediate actions that we need to look at now, and then those challenges that are a little bit slower, it can help us articulate the conversation slightly differently.
Amazing. Thank you, Eve. Thank you, everybody. It's so powerful and actually so scary. Actually, even when you speak about Gary, you mentioned, you know, the coastal erosion, going back to a place and you can't use it anymore. But talking about how we respond to these challenges, obviously sport organisations and national governing bodies are becoming more aware of it. They're beginning to understand their impacts, implement strategies, looking at certifications. But how are actually the sports adapting? Are they able to? Gary, can I come to you on this one?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, as a national governing body, you know, you have to show leadership in this space. I think the first step is having, I suppose, being accountable, right? So with Volleyball Ireland now, it's a key section in our strategic plan is around sustainability, with key results in there and key initiatives mapped out. As I mentioned earlier, first governing body to sign up to the various frameworks, which gives us that accountability and almost, I wouldn't say forces our hand because we want to do it, but it means that it's always, I suppose, front and centre and is always on the agenda. But then I think, you know, what's really important is don't maybe think about this, or we're trying not to think about this as a huge global challenge that Volleyball Ireland can take on. We're trying to do small actions, right? Things that are visible so people can see, and really try and become an influencer. We're a relatively small organisation, 6 full-time equivalents. You know, we don't have a huge footprint. However, we have 50 member clubs. They have members, and their members have family and friends. So how can we use our position as the governing body to become that influencer? And I think that starts by taking action and being really, really vocal with that. So at our events, for example, you know, this is really bad to say and kind of embarrassed, but our beach volleyball events, we would come and we provide bottled water, right, for the players, for the volunteers. Those days are gone now. So rather than that, we bring in a water cube, right? I think we have a member from, one of the staff members from Triathlon Ireland on this call. We actually stole that idea from them, right? So thank you, Natasha, for that. But it's something that straight away our members recognised and seen, and it got them thinking. And I think in terms of responding to the challenges, it's really about a mindset, and it's around looking at everything we can do and how we can just make it a little bit better. You know, Dave Brailsford will talk about his 1% and the growth mindset and all that sort of stuff. I think you can take the same principle that you would with a high performance environment and put it into a sustainability environment. What little things can we do to just try and take a little bit, make, you know, a little bit improvement, small piece by piece. I think really, you know, the mindset and the attitude is our main response at this moment.
I love that. And you're so right. It's the small things that so many sports organisations could be thinking about that will make eventually a huge impact. Fergus, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, another couple of really good points there from Gary. I think, yeah, I'll follow on the thread from the national governing body's perspective. It can be quite overwhelming, and it is quite overwhelming. I don't expect anyone to get the violin out here for the CEO of a governing body, but we have so much to do. If you look at the remit letters from UK Sport, from the sport councils, whether it be Sport England, Sport Scotland, or Sport Wales, and you look at government requirements and expectations on organisations like us these days, you've got governance requirements, you've got EDI requirements, you've got culture, safeguarding, welfare. On top of that, you've got, the sustainability piece. And if you're a Olympic sport like we are, you've got Commonwealth Games every other 2 years, every 4 years, but every other 2 years on the offbeats, and you've got an up and coming Paris Olympic Games, which consumes a lot of your resources. So you've got all these things on your plate, and it can be quite overwhelming. You think, well, how do I get round to that? I started on Monday with the best intentions. I've got a list of things to do. I get to Friday, I haven't done anything on sustainability. And I think it's to Gary's point. What we've tried to do is just work with independent outside consultants, we've identified sort of 15 things that a leisure operator or provider can do to improve efficiency in their pool. And that might be anything from filtration systems to how they heat water, how they use their energy, how they purchase energy. Do they use what kind of lighting they use in the building, lighting versus air conditioning, and getting all of that right. And it's amazing how much inefficiency is in the system. And we've had to become experts very, very quickly at understanding some of these environmental aspects. And I think to Gary's point again, it's just kind of signposting or identifying some of these areas and bringing them to other busy people and bringing them to other partners and saying, look, and hand-holding, saying, look, these guys in Powys have done something really interesting because we work across the whole Wales. We touch all these 400 partners, 22 local authorities, etc., 7 leisure trusts. And we hear these great projects, and we say, would you mind us putting you in touch with somebody else and making a connection? And you sort of make those introductions, facilitate those conversations, and actually just influence and signpost. And I think by collecting those like little wins, our job then, we see our job is there's nobody nationally kind of telling that story. So we're putting those good news stories in front of Welsh Government and Sport Wales and other departments, the Environment Department, climate change. And these are the people that would normally not hear of this. And it's amazing how many of them have said, well, what else can you do? If we put in a bit of investment, could we multiply that by 10? So you start to find a role for yourself as a national governing body. And I think there's always something you can do, even if the agenda is a busy one, is my point.
Mm. Can I totally agree with that in terms of what I've learned since I've joined the sporting industry on sustainability is that not all sports are created equal when it comes to sustainability. And what I'm finding at the moment is we're all kind of put into this same bucket of the sports industry must be sustainable, but the challenges for Chelsea Football Club are completely different to my challenges with triathlon. For one, I don't have a stadium and I don't have a venue and I don't have tens of thousands of fans coming to watch my events, although that would be great. And Chelsea Football Club don't necessarily care about the quality of the English rivers, of which 0% are currently in good or high overall health, which impacts my athletes, footballers, probably less bothered about it. So what I like about what we're kind of talking about here, because we're kind of NGBs focusing on this, is we as sports organisations really need to ascertain like what our major contributors are, but also where our strengths lie in what it is that we're trying to do. As Fergus says, is it bringing people together and trying to signpost people to the right places to find organisations that can help and find our voice. I think that is one area where we all need to understand the skin in the game. We need the Manchester Uniteds of these worlds, or we need the RFUs and the England Rugbies to be working with the Nikes and the Adidases to improve how they create their clothes, where it comes down to people like myself and rowing and others to champion for the clean water piece of work. So I think for us on like responding to the challenges, we all need to understand what our role is and what we can do. And then the other thing I would say is it's like one of my favorite sayings is you can't manage what you don't measure. And I think another aspect facing us as sports organisations is we need to measure our carbon footprints and understand them and then appreciate where we can make changes, Whereas what I'm realizing is that most of the changes triathlon can make, yes, are in the event space, but are actually in the giving voice to our athletes and our participants. And that's where we as an NGB want to try and place. And I know, Gary, you spoke about that, about, you know, the clubs that you have. You might only be 6 FTEs, but all the different clubs and the people that you represent, how can we do that? So it needs to be a proportionate response. I think we can't all do the same thing, would be my takeaway.
Really good point, thank you. And I think, like you've all mentioned, really, it would be great to even look at sharing good practices amongst similar national governing bodies, like you say, if they're water related, or, you know, mountains or land, and sharing good practices, like instead of using the water bottles, isn't it? I think that would hopefully make a big impact. Looking at actions, like you mentioned, that we can take in all of different sports. Carolyn, I'll come to you first on this one. And this might be a good time for people on the call listening, maybe to jot down some notes if there's any practical actions that you might want to put into practice into your sports organisations. But obviously no stress, because we are recording the session. But Carolyn, are there any actions that you could look at that would help national and governing bodies and sports deal with the challenges that we have mentioned so far?
Yes, I think lots been mentioned already by the panelists. The key, can seem overwhelming. I think there's so many different aspects to environmental sustainability and social impact of our sports that it can be overwhelming at first, and where to start and knowing what to do at first is sometimes too much, which is why there's maybe not so much momentum in many sports at the moment. Learning from others is important. Most problems have been tackled before by other sports or other businesses or other land users. So learning and getting some training in sustainability, I think, is very important on the off. Understanding, as he said, understanding your particular situation, whether it's your organisation or your facilities, key impacts and key challenges, because they will be unique. Even within your sport, they will be unique. Gathering data, again, as Eve said, without the data, without the knowledge, knowing what your risks are, knowing what your emissions are, your carbon emissions, how much waste you're producing, how much energy you're using, get some good data behind it. And that's something that can be done in-house. That's not something you necessarily need support with. Once you've got all that information, that's when you can start to look at strategies. Where do you want to be in the future? What are your goals and your aims, and how are you going to get there? What's your action plan? So there's a lot of kind of groundwork can be done quite easily before putting in place and launching big strategies out to the world. And I think that's something that it is a bit off-putting. People think, oh goodness, we've got to suddenly have a big strategy and plan, and we don't know where to start. So taking some key priority issues, perhaps if it is an outdoor sport that is prone to flooding, if your pitches are built on floodplains or you're near a river, and understanding what the risk is, whether it is, as Eve said, a short-term impact, something that needs to be tackled immediately, or something for longer term. Get that knowledge. Things like drought conditions. Ironically, in the UK, we can have flooding at one point and then drought later on in the year as well. Heat adaptation, again, these kind of climate issues that affect indoors as well. Will your facility require air conditioning in the future? You don't have it at the moment. So this kind of longer term view. Things like coastal erosion was mentioned before as well. Understanding, again, the risks you're at. All parts of the UK now have government coastal management plans that you can tap into this scientific knowledge of predicting the future and see exactly what investment might be required in the future. And look at climate impacts like lack of snow was mentioned before as well, and how you're adapting your schedules, your time of matches and events, and leagues, and how far are you traveling. There's so many considerations that are not necessarily high cost solutions. It's just adapting the way you're managing your sports, whether that's from a governing body point of view, how you can support all your member and affiliated clubs and facilities, or from an individual facility point of view. So yeah, there's not enough time to really go into too many in-depth detailed actions. That's the sort of thing you can understand, you can get more of a grip on from some of the training courses that I know Accelerate Sport are going to be launching. But looking again, resources, it was previously mentioned there, I think by Gary, about looking at your, from the catering operations, your cups, plastic cups that you're disposing of, single-use plastics, your food provision. Can your food become more sustainable? Can it be locally provisions, local suppliers, reducing haulage miles, seasonal fruit, seasonal vegetables, and things like that. All of these actions can reduce carbon footprint, but also reduce your impacts on local environment. Not jumping too far around as well, but going back to resources, water is a big one as well. It's going to become extremely costly. So in the internal facility environment, looking at water saving devices in changing facilities and kitchens and hospitality. Outdoors, looking at more sustainable and efficient irrigation systems to reduce your water. Again, materials and waste, making sure you're recycling and reusing, reducing, reusing, recycling all the materials you can. Looking at your clothing and equipment. Can you have more sustainable kit? Can your kit be reused and handed down in community clubs and grassroots level, reusing kit or donating it, so it's not just going straight to landfill after a year? All these kind of aspects, looking at more sustainable materials for your equipment. There's an awful lot of research and development going on within the sporting world regarding clothing and equipment. So making sure you're on the ball and clued up to what opportunities are available when next time you're commissioning or buying more kit for your teams or your staff as well. Transport, again, goodness me, we could go on for hours about these, but transport's another area. How are your teams travelling around? How are your spectators and your staff travelling? Car sharing, providing energy, electric car, charging points at your facilities. Can you reduce team travel onto more energy efficient buses rather than all travelling individually? There's a whole host of great information out there about sustainable travel and active travel. So not just using public transport, but also providing the opportunity for walking and cycling and using more sustainable forms of transport to get to and from your venues. So that's a snapshot from my ideas of some of the areas that can be looked at. Goodness me, we could talk for hours. It's a big topic, but I think some of the other members of the panel have already implemented some of these actions. If they want
That's
to
amazing.
contribute.
Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Ideas.
Very extensive list and lots of things to think about there. So thank you.
Too much to talk about in such a short time. But...
No, talk about it all day. Fergus,
Good.
I know you have.
Yeah, just a quick point jumped into my head as Carolyn was talking. I think in sport sometimes we think we need to have and find the answers internally, and especially when you're in I work across participation, and we work across participation and performance. So I think predominantly in the performance space, where it sometimes feels like we have to, the duty's on us to find the solution, find the answers. So there's lots of people who want to help sport. And I would urge people to reach out, to ask your suppliers these questions, good open questions about how can I improve. Ask your supply chain, ask your volunteers and your clubs, because you wouldn't know what is sitting on a committee, a club committee. It could be somebody working in Deloitte, PwC, specialized in this stuff, or works for. There's lots of energy companies out there. It's a growing industry. Ask your board members, your friends. If you're sitting in the pub and at the weekend, I don't get to do that often with 4 kids, but if you are in those environments, ask the question: do you know anyone who would know a little bit about this? And just and you'd be surprised at the results. Really, just asking for help. And like I said, people like sports. People want to help sporting organisations.
Georgia, can I just add, there's a couple of pieces from my perspective as a governing body, and also within my role as chief executive. And I think 3 key kind of actions really that we've looked at in the last, I'd say, 6-12 months. And the first one is really around training and education, of course, of our members, but also of our boards. So if you're a staff member here in NGB and you're really passionate about this area and you are officially or unofficially the sustainability champion, put pressure up the chain as well. If we can be educating our board members on the importance of this and what can be done, that can have a huge impact when it comes to policy making, when it comes to strategy. we're in this together, right? It was one of the points made earlier, sharing ideas. And I know, I think Fergus made it earlier that we're a little bit behind the 8 ball maybe, and we should have been thinking this 20, 30 years ago. I actually think when you compare the people on this call to the rest of the world, particularly my experience of European volleyball, for example, is actually we're probably ahead of the game. So we have a job to do, not only in our own countries and our own federations, but to lobby, to try and influence at a wider European international level when we're at those congresses and AGMs. I think that's where we can have a massive impact as well. And then thirdly, the big action for me is tell the story. And I've mentioned it a few times now about being visible. We have to document that, and we have to keep almost ramming it down people's throats, be consistent with the message around what we're doing as a governing body, and really don't be afraid to be sharing the successes here and celebrating the actions, even the small actions. Celebrate every one of them, because it can influence somebody, and it can maybe have a bit of a butterfly effect on another organisation or somebody else. As I mentioned earlier, Triathlon Ireland on this call, they're doing great work. We've stole 2 or 3 great projects from them because we've seen it and because it was visible.
Brill, thank you, Gary. Eve, did you have anything that you want to add as well on that?
Just that I think this influencing up's really great. So to hear that, we've got CEOs on the call that are essentially saying influence up. I think on that international stage, we're looking at World Triathlon at the moment, and it's true that both in sport and sustainability in sport, the UK and Europe is definitely leading the way. And there's ways in which we want to try and influence those world organizations. For us, it's around thinking about the calendar and athlete travel, and having them flying across different continents a lot is quite the challenge. And the other thing I would just say on the actions is don't be afraid to learn. I love what Fergus said about there's lots of other people that want to help us. I completely agree. And I'm at the moment trying to work with people within British Triathlon to improve their carbon literacy and think about how they can learn this space, because I've also sensed an element of fear coming into this industry, that there's a lot of people that are fearful of it. And Gary, you alluded to it by saying, please share the stories and be open. But I think there is a fear here, and especially within participants and athletes, that if they raise their head above the parapet, they'll kind of get shot down because of different aspects. So, for example, if you're a footballer and you all of a sudden start talking about environmental sustainability, you can be shot in the foot by someone coming along and saying, yeah, but you wear a brand new t-shirt for every game and you're flying across Europe in private jets to take part. Like, you look like a hypocrite. I don't think that's something we should shy away from, but it's definitely something within the sporting industry that I feel and I understand is there. But I think for most people on this call, we are all in positions to be able to learn this space and feel educated and responsible enough to kind of make change. That's all I was going to add.
Thank you. Wow, such powerful messages that have come across. I think, like Carolyn said, we could talk about this all day. Amazing. Okay, so we touched on energy efficiency earlier, but let's dive into it a little bit more. So I think before we go into it, there should be a poll appearing on your screen with a question. Hopefully that should pop up now. There we are. So what percentage of greenhouse gas emissions created by major sports events come from travel of fans? Do you think it's 30%, 53% or 85%? I'll just give you a moment so you can answer them. Okay. Hope you've all done that now. So the answer is indeed, oh yeah, that's appeared now, C, 85%, which is a staggering amount. Whether you're surprised by that or not is another thing, but it's a really high number. So obviously energy efficiency is a huge thing. Reducing the quantity of energy that we use through actions will also help with reducing the costs as we move through this latest energy crisis. And I've got a bit of research data here, which is quite interesting. And it says, according to Sport England research, leisure facility energy costs, especially those with swimming pools, are a large proportion of operating budgets and were forecast to rise up to 25% of expenditure by 2023. I don't know if Fergus is able to answer this question at the minute, because I know he might be on the move, but or if Gary as well, or Eve, if you find that this has been the case, and if so, what steps have been taken to be more energy efficient? I know you kind of touched on it earlier, Fergus.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I just swapped for the car. Thanks for covering for me, Georgia. Yeah, I think it's a huge. We're just in the middle of an audit. Every 5 years we do a facility audit in Wales, and we're in the middle of that at the moment, and we'll have that completed sort of early summer, where we'll go through those 500 pools, and we'll not only ask the traditional questions of length and breadth and depth and size and user groups, etc., but we're moving into lots more sustainability questions, and that's going to help us tease out literally how many litres of water there are in Wales in these pools. We've got I learned a new term a few weeks back, carbon accountancy. So we've got some carbon accountants in there who are going to do some of this number crunching for us, and actually get us some really, really decent numbers. So to go back to your question, one of the risks for us as a organisation and for aquatics, whether it be England, Scotland, or Wales, it's the same issue right across the UK and other countries too. Are these costs? And yeah, if local authorities are looking at where they can cut costs, they are absolutely looking at the bottom line. They're looking at those energy bills, and some of the pools can be £250,000 a year easily for a moderate size pool. That could be a 25-meter 8-lane pool that you just have in your local leisure centre. So some of these bills can be absolutely eye-watering. So that's why we had to accelerate that list of 15 things, and it's not an exhaustive list that local authorities can apply. And it's actually, for us, it's about getting those efficiencies in under the right noses and getting into the right people, because it's very, very easy for the accountants to look at a spreadsheet, see the costs and put a line through something because they need to save £4 million next year. We're very lucky at Swim Wales. Our chair at the moment, our current chair is a senior person in a local authority in North Wales who's got direct insight into some of this stuff. So he's helping us sort of shape our approach. But just to summarise, because I'm conscious of time and bringing everyone else in, yeah, it's a massive issue. If we don't do anything and we don't get in front of these right people, use that word Gary used earlier on about influencing decision makers, that's that political advocacy is one of our key roles right now. And not just shouting hashtag save our pools like we did last year. There was a moment in time where that was appropriate, but now it's about save our pools. And here's how. So we need to be coming with solutions and some real practical solutions. And that's where the peer group can really help, because if you can say, look, for £50,000 over here, somebody invested in new lighting, new filtration, new air conditioning systems. Yes, it's 50 grand in the short term, but long term, it's taken 15% off the annual bill. So over 5 years, this could be a £75,000, £100,000 saving. So please look at the short term and the long term. And it's about literally, getting those names, getting those email addresses, and if I have to, I'll get in front of them myself. But showing them what the solutions could be, and they are up for looking at the big picture, because they know that learning to swim, they know that physical and mental health is important to their communities, and we know when communities are at threat, when leisure centres and facilities are at threat, the community steps up. So they are reluctant to make these cuts, but let's help them with the solutions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fergus. Such valid points there. Gary, in volleyball, have you seen the same kind of increase in terms of energy?
Yeah, so we don't own facilities ourselves. However, we did a piece of research with our member clubs. I'm going to say it's probably 18 months ago now. And we've seen a year-on-year increase from, I think it was because of COVID, it was comparing 2019, I think, then to 2022. 23% increase in whole hire fees per hour, right? which then when you broke it down per member club and added it all together, it was an increase of just over 81,000 for our member clubs for one season in terms of delivering indoor volleyball. So, what could our sports do with 81 grand? It could have an amazing impact. So we've seen a huge direct cost increase for our member clubs. And then when it came to the governing body, look, we're an international federation. We have national teams. We're on an island. We have to fly to competition, right? But we figured out that the direct cost of flying increased 27%, comparing similar journeys, right? So all that has a huge impact on our bottom line, which we complained about and felt a little bit sorry for ourselves. But ultimately, as Fergus said, you also need to have the solution. So we made a move around kickstarting the development of park volleyball to try and help our clubs, particularly in the summer months. That's not really a format that is particularly well known or popular. It's certainly not an Olympic sport, and there's no European competition in grass volleyball. However, it was a creative way to get people playing, and the more they played, the more they were outdoors, the more they enjoyed it. And now there's a movement, almost a third format of our game evolved from that. And it comes back to the point earlier around the threats and the risks and the challenges. There's always opportunities as well. And I think, this conversation can always, maybe moves in a negative direction, but let's always keep at the front of our minds what the solutions are and the potential opportunities.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Gary. I'm conscious of time, but we are coming to the end of the discussion, and we are going to touch upon the question I think everybody would love to know. But what actions can sports take to increase their profits and become more sustainable? Obviously, Carolyn touched on quite a few of them earlier, but how can clubs pay less, use less, and waste less? Looking at, obviously, like we said, water conservation, material waste, clothing and equipment. Are there any community-focused actions we spoke about earlier? You mentioned partnerships and activations. But Carolyn, I'll come to you first on this one. I know we mentioned.
Yeah, sorry, I think, I kind of covered a few bits earlier on, but just jumping briefly back onto the energy efficiency there, lighting, heating, insulation, air conditioning. These are all issues that every other building, not just sport, has. So there are solutions out there. There are experts out there. I even was on a seminar not long ago about some leisure centres that have linked in with local computer data storage. Lots of industries have excess heat they need to get rid of. And if they're close enough by, they can be used to grasp that excess waste heat from another industry and used to heat and power and heat our water and heat our facilities as well. So yes, just briefly there, partnerships is the key, and looking to other businesses in the area and working with councils and governments in your area to see what opportunities there are to cross over with other industries. Other points about increasing profits, I think I covered a few before. Water conservation, becoming efficient is the main thing first before you start looking at alternative sources, but there are alternative sources such as apart from using mains water, using borehole water, abstracted water, rainwater harvesting. There's lots of other ways of getting cheaper, albeit an initial investment, but cheaper in the long run, water sources that can be used in your facilities. I think we mentioned there clothing and equipment. Again, reusing, sharing, bulk purchasing. Some governing bodies have ways of helping their member clubs to save money by working with companies that buy en masse. So they will get a cheaper option for their members by buying bulk purchasing, basically buying energy for a number of facilities. So you don't have to always get a good deal yourself to pay less and use less. Again, materials and waste, making sure any waste materials can be reused or donated. Another thing is green waste in turf industries. Green waste can be composted and then used back onto the sports field and the golf course, for example. So yes, there's lots and lots of ways to use the materials you're already using and you're wasting, and to make sure you're wasting less to increase your profits. And overall, it's providing more value for money to your members and your participants, because as we said at the very beginning, the people power, people expecting more of our sport, expecting us to be efficient, expecting us to do the best with what we've got at a time when grants and other kind of funding might be harder to get. We have to look at what we're doing in practice as well. So yes, again, increasing profits it's one of those positive ways. Being sustainable can actually have a positive impact on your business. It's not just addressing a challenge.
Yeah, I would love to add to that around the partnerships piece as well. What Carolyn's talked about there is the concept of circularity. So again, in that kind of carbon literacy piece, think about circularity and how we can bring that into sport, because I don't think we're very good at doing it at the moment. But in terms of partnerships, there are organisations out there that might not be ordinary partners that we've partnered with before, but they might align to our sustainability objectives or your sustainability objectives as a sport. And an example I'd love to give is Welsh Triathlon are exposing their clubs and members to an organisation called EcoWash, who are actually trying to improve the way in which we wash our sports clothing, but with more eco-friendly laundry detergent. And you can't imagine that triathlon 5 years ago, it's all about the bikes or the wetsuits or something, but actually there are partnerships out there to be made with organisations that align to your values that might be a little bit off the wall, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be investing and supporting those organisations, and especially if they're local UK branded partnerships as well.
Brilliant. Really good point, Dave. Thank you. Gary, is there anything you wanted to mention on the partnerships?
Yeah, look, I think fundamentally the principle that for me is around being creative, and sometimes it's difficult. There's so many things to do when you're running a governing body, but try to take the time to take a step back and look at where your gaps are and where you need help. And typically there are organisations that can fill that gap. So for example, in Ireland, there's a brilliant non-profit called Food Cloud, and they go around various restaurants and hotels and gather up all the unused food, and they have a food truck, and then they basically create various meals and sell them. So we intend to partner with them for our cup final weekend. So we're basically then using that food that would have been going to landfill as a way of fueling our players and fueling our volunteers for that weekend. It's just a real simple, just one example. I think if you take a step back, you look at your gaps, you'll find 100 ways in which there are potential partnerships out there that can help with your mission and your aims.
Fab, thank you. Brilliant. Right, before we move to the Q&A, I just want to touch upon the training that's available from Accelerate Sport for sporting organisations, associations and clubs within the sustainability area. So Accelerate Sport have a limited offer to everybody that's attending today for an e-learning course, Sustainability in Sport. And there will be a code for 20% discount that is available only to people that are on the call today, that will be sent out. The course is currently available to pre-purchase before it launches in a few weeks. And then you can also book meetings with Accelerate Sport to discuss a range of courses that they have to offer, ranging from equality and diversity, tackling racism and engaging girls in sport. So I want to mention that I've got a few questions for our panelists that I'd like to go through. Okay, so first question is, how can we help enable voluntary run sports clubs plan for budget and take actions to be more sustainable where they have limited resource? If you're happy to answer, you can just put your hand up. Or
I can jump in there, Georgia. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt, Carolyn?
No. Go ahead, okay. Gary.
Sorry. I think it's a question that's a question from a sports club perspective, but it's a question that would have been asked of me from a board member with the same context. We're a small governing body, we have limited resources. Why aren't we investing more in coach education or refereeing or player development? I think those are all legitimate questions, but it's around that long-term view, and also, I suppose, again, use the phrase telling the story of that return of investment will come if you do invest in this, because your members want it, they might expect it, the positivity that can create around your environment. But I think fundamentally that the main thing would be sharing of ideas. There's probably one club 5 miles down the road that has done something really simple, but it's had a big impact. I think more we can just share those ideas amongst the clubs. Maybe have a sustainability champion in every club, and maybe they meet quarterly to share what's worked well, or some ideas, some partnership that's developed. Just sharing thoughts, sharing views. I think the community can really come together on this topic and work together. And the more people we get involved, the bigger the movement can be.
Brilliant, thank you, Gary.
I'm happy to come in there as well, Georgia. I think those very valid points. I think also looking at what can a community club control. So I'm a great believer in control your controllables, and so as an NGB earlier on, we talked about where's best, where are we most efficient, where can we contribute the most with limited resources or resources spread across multiple different priorities and responsibilities as an NGB, and we can apply the same kind of mindset or thought process to the clubs, and that's something that we are doing at the moment. We've got a program in place called Our Club. In English it's called Our Club, or Ein Club in Welsh, and part of that will be a number of things that you can think about. So where are the main costs? We should know as an NGB where the main costs for our community clubs will be. They'll be in staffing, coaching, and they'll be in facility hire. That's predominantly, they don't pay energy bills. They're not responsible or accountable for energy bills, but they will have a higher cost. Well, they need, like us, to go outside of the box. They need to come with solutions to the local authority. They might want to reach out to other clubs and say, is there any sustainability programs, anything clever that your local authority are doing that has alleviated the pressure on your bills and your higher costs? And therefore, they can reach out to other clubs and take examples, or reach back to us and say, is there anything I could bring to the local authority? Are you working with the local authority? Can we join that? Because ultimately they're going to be paying if those costs and those energy bills are going up by 10, 15, 20%, they're going to be priced out of it. So, it's in their interest too. So I think just stepping back and controlling what they can control, and actually working with the NGB. I mean, if we don't have the answer ourselves, we'll know somebody will.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll move on just because
Can I just add to that? Okay. Sorry, just quickly, yes. A lot of grassroots clubs, there's a lot of free advice available from governments, councils, and national governing bodies. So just really tap into what you can for free. A lot of clubs that are staffed by volunteers really don't have necessarily the time or the skill set initially to deal with things themselves. But yeah, just talk up the way and find out what's available for free. There's lots of.
Thank you, Carolyn. I've got another question here on certification. How can certification of sustainability in sports foster greater transparency and accountability within the industry? Eve?
Yeah, go on. I'm happy to take that. I think the only way change is going to happen in the sports industry is if we are held accountable, as Gary has already mentioned. And one of those ways is through managing our footprint and therefore being certified for it and against it. I think other industries have accelerated over the last 5 to 6 years only because regulation has come in, or only because they're being asked to certify against certain criteria. I think the challenge we have is that there are lots of certifications, and a number of them, especially in the sports industry, are voluntary. So the UN Sports for Climate Action is voluntary already. SBTI is voluntary. The only one that's come in recently, I think, is TCFD. I'm sorry for all the acronyms, but I'm kind of saying it to prove a point that there are so many different certifications, acronyms, organizations trying to work on this. But I think the only way we're going to see action genuinely is if we build in certification and we build in regulation, because then we can go out to our suppliers, we can go out to organizations and try and encourage change in a more positive way and react more effectively. So I am all for certification in this space.
And anybody, Gary, did you have anything to add on that one? I have one more question.
I suppose, like, It's an interesting one around. I'm not. I guess there's a few calls from UK sports bodies on this call, and I know in Ireland we have the governance code for sport, and I guess there's something similar in the UK, right? My sense is that there'll be something similar coming from a sustainability perspective, where government-funded organisations like sports bodies will be mandated to have sustainability action plans, to have their missions, targets documented, and so on and so forth. We would welcome that in Volleyball Ireland. We think that would be a positive step. It's had an impact in other areas such as gender equality on boards, and I do think there is. I would like to see that. I think that will happen in time, and then sports bodies and various organisations will be mandated to achieve this. And unfortunately, sometimes it does need a stick as much as it needs a carrot.
Definitely. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. It's sometimes that certifications or standards that need to be met for whether it's for funding may seem like a stick, but actually they can be a carrot as well. They can be an opportunity to promote best practice and promote your sustainability achievements as well. So it's a double-edged sword, really. It's a lot of hard work to get certifications, to get to certain standards, but it can be very positive, beneficial as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carolyn. I'm just making sure, because we've covered a lot of the answers that were put in the questions beforehand. So I think last one, how do we make community initiatives more sustainable? They always require funding to keep them running. Eve, do you want to come up on that one?
Yeah, I just did a. Yeah, it's challenging. So sometimes it can be that it requires funding to keep going, but sometimes that funding is probably more energy and decisive action from people and humans. So from my experience, and Carolyn's been in sports sustainability for longer, but in my experience from the sustainability programs I've built before, it's sort of one or the other. It's that carrot and stick that Gary mentioned. Is if you've got money, yes, you can keep something going. But what I've experienced is actually having individuals that know what they're doing or have the resource to continue to help you is actually more beneficial, because sometimes funding can be ring fenced. So something can, this is for the next 6 months, or this must be spent by the end of March, in which case, is there any sustainable plans for what it is that you've put in place? You might have made this one event really sustainable because you had money for it, but actually it's what's happening at the next 10 events that you're running next year. So, but on the funding side, there are funding pots available from different organisations that I would urge people to look at. I'm starting to look at them at British Triathlon as well. Different funding pots from not just government, but national lottery funding and other kind of agencies that are putting together sustainability pots of funding for organisations to go to try and seek that out. So if funding is where you're going, maybe look a little bit outside the box and look outside of sporting organisations. And then the other one is pulling together a group and a resource that maybe instead of applying funding to it, you can make it part of their commitments, or you can make it part of the we're thinking about putting it into our event accreditation, so that it then becomes part of someone's job to actually look at it, what we're doing. A lot of time, like, oh, I haven't got time to do that, I've got these other 10 things. Well, let's make sustainability one of the 10 things, and then hopefully resourcing will come. But it is a really, really challenging one. I hope that sort of helps in some way.
Brilliant. So thank you so much for that, Eve. And we've gone 3 minutes over 2 o'clock, so I'm so conscious of time. But thank you so much. I've just noticed there's a link that's been put in the chat, Friends of the Earth Standard for Certification in Sports. But thank you so much to our guest panelists and for everybody that's come on the call today. I hope that you found it useful and have a lot of things to think about and some actions that you might be able to implement into your sports.